I seem to be on a roll lately with these topical videos. Today, now, this time, the problem with Jean-Luc Picard. When I first read in TV Guide about Jean-Luc Picard, I was very excited. I should preface that. When we first heard about Captain William Riker, I was very excited because he seemed like a very Kirk-like character, and I thought, we needed another Kirk-like character. Then time went on, and we got the info that they'd updated this, and we got Jean-Luc Picard. But he was described as being somewhat stern, stoic, and firm, and a similarity in his name to Captain Pike, and I've talked about this in other videos. Pike, Picard, this is clearly the recycling by Roddenberry of a character he wanted to explore, a French version of Pike, the same way he did Riker and Deanna are Decker and Ilea, and so on. The problem with Jean-Luc Picard is what we got was not Pike. What we got was not somebody who was, yes, he's awfully stoic, and he can come across as quite firm, but he's also very much not Pike. Pike was a lot more, the little bit we see him in the cage, and I mean real Pike. I saw a little bit of the later, but I don't follow it. I don't watch any of that Kurtzman nonsense. But Pike had that sort of adventure captain quality that Kirk would exemplify, but he's a little bit more reserved and a little bit more serious. And I always thought from the time I saw The Cage, like, I wish I'd seen this explored. Yeah, we all grew up loving Kirk, but I liked the Pike thing. And Jeffrey Hunter, great actor. I mean, he played Jesus in one of the only movies about Jesus I like, because they're usually so bad. King of Canes, Jeffrey Hunter as Jesus. But he captures that manliness without coming across as too over-the-top arrogant. He's introspective without being too soft. Jean-Luc Picard never captures this well. They certainly try to convey this sort of mythos around him, how he's not good with children, and he doesn't like to talk about his feelings, and there's an almost Vulcan quality to the man. And yet, we see there's an inconsistency in the writing. The same thing with the theology thing I've mentioned elsewhere. He sometimes is sort of open-minded about people and the meaning of the universe. And then other times he goes on long, hateful rants about anybody believing in anything at all because it's just stupid superstition. There's not a consistency that you would like to see. But Jean-Luc Picard then becomes more of he's too stoic. He's more of a bureaucrat than he is an action hero. Key example, and the details of episodes I'm going to mention, they not only, the things I assert may not fit the details of the episode, but I do assert that they would have been written differently had they been written for Captain Kirk. The wounded. The Cardassians are violating the treaty. They're running weapons. The USS Phoenix has gone into Cardassian space. The captain is destroying Cardassian ships. Picard is sent in to rope him in and bring him back. There's a great scene with O'Brien singing with his former captain about war and glory. This is good stuff. And at the end, Picard sits calmly in his chair and tells Gul Macet, who looks suspiciously like Gul Dukat will, says, "We'll be watching." Like this is supposed to scare a Cardassian. See, yeah, his job was to preserve the treaty and prevent a war. If Captain Kirk had been in command, if this had been Kirk's enterprise, there would have been a happy ending. And this is the problem with Jean-Luc Picard. We don't get the outcomes we should get. Yes, we get ones that are in some sense more realistic, more modern, more compromising, but you lost some of that heroic component by doing it that way. Captain James T. Kirk would have gone into Cardassian territory to get that guy for breaking the treaty. And after he found out what the guy suspected, he'd have put him in the brig. He'd have put Spock in command of his ship. He would not have let him command it out of some sense of, dignity for the guy that offended. But somewhere along the line, they would have become suspicious. They would have scanned something, picked up something. Kirk would have found weapons being transported, and Kirk would have gone after one of those Cardassian ships, Or he would have sent a secret message to Spock in command of the Phoenix, go after that ship, I'll chase you. They would have got there, found the weapons, exposed the plot. They would have bullied the Cardassians into standing down. Now that they were exposed for violating the treaty, Kirk would have shamed them, disgraced them, vindicated a little bit the captain in the brig, though he would still go back and face trial for violating the treaty all on his own. But there would have been vindication and completion, and then Kirk would have been like, we're going to be watching you. It would have ultimately been much more satisfying than what we got. Now, I could probably go on and pick apart every single episode of Star Trek The Next Generation and say how James T. Kirk would have done it differently. And again, because the circumstances would have been adjusted for the narrative to fit a Captain Kirk sort of victory. A Captain Kirk sort of, the good guy sticks to his guns and the good thing happens by the end, or at least we know we're on a path to a good outcome because he stuck to his guns. And it's not what we get with Jean-Luc Picard. Jean-Luc Picard ends up giving us a Star Trek that in that regard is far less satisfying. It is, as I often say, the later seasons of TNG, once it found its footing, is probably some of the best television ever made for philosophy, introspection, the overall quality, the acting, the effects even, the way it's put together, especially for the time. But there's a lot of things about those stories that you're left feeling unsatisfied in. And I think you're supposed to, because they're driving more towards, there's more of a realism, of a gritty sort of, things don't always work out, as opposed to the original series coming straight off of the Western and the good guy in the white hat that portrayed a certain worldview of its time, though projected into the future. But I really miss, that's one of the components of that original Star Trek that we don't get enough of, that victory against all odds of the good outcome because somebody stuck their guns. The realism that we got was great, and especially like Deep Space Nine and others, it gets darker, but it gets more realistic about human nature and retains its optimistic view of what you're struggling for, which is always key to this. But a lot of times you don't get the end. Another one I want to pick on, Captain Benjamin Sisko. I did a whole video about how I love Captain Sisko and I hate Captain Sisko. Bringing the Romulans into the war, into the Dominion War, and the fact that he lied and he cheated and essentially committed murder, was implicated in committing murder. You needed the Romulans into the war, but you needed the Romulans to understand the threat of the Dominion. It does give it, again, more of a realism to do this lying conspiratorial plot, and it brings the Federation's dignity level down, though, in doing. And Captain James T. Kirk would have got that done without doing that. James T. Kirk would have found the evidence for real. He would have found something that proved some way to convince them. He would have risked all, done something to get to the Romulans and communicate with them. He would have got the same result, but he would have done it without shredding the dignity of the Federation, of Starfleet, and his own personal honor. So this is the difference between earlier Trek and later Trek. And though there's so many great things about later Trek, real of the 5 series, the original series just, that never really gets captured consistently enough the way that it does with Captain Kirk.